All right, I'm reacting to a reaction. I hope you guys like these still. I don't really have a chat, so I'm here using someone else's chat. This is why do people play MMOs solo? Let me know in the comments why you play MMO solo, if you do, or why you don't. Personally, I play MMO solo because I don't want to have to wait up for somebody. I like to be able to just keep on going, and most of the people I know aren't going to catch up. So you might as well find friends inside of the MMO to play with through guilds or clans or whatever the game calls it. But let's see what they say.
Solo.
Josh Strife Hayes.
See about this.
What is an MMORPG? A question asked by scholars and philosophers alike. How do we define
And YouTubers, and more importantly, YouTube commenters and people on the forums of MMORPG games
this genre? This question is actually so volatile and divisive in the MMO community, it really needs its own series of videos split over several specific topics.
So let me explain what an MMORPG is. An MMORPG is a game that has all the stuff that you like.
True.
Now, games that don't have all the stuff that you like, those aren't MMORPGs.
What are they?
Okay? So, like, for example, if you like PvP in an MMO, and there's an MMO that comes out and it doesn't have that, and it's not a focus, well, then that's not a real MMORPG. If you like raiding, and an MMO comes out and there's no raiding, well, that's not a real MMO.
It's not an MMO.
It's completely
raids.
different.
Let's
So
be real.
that's how you define them. I don't know why Josh is having so much trouble with this here, but yeah, it's pretty simple.
Look, I think an MMORPG is, at a base level, it's an RPG. It's a role-playing game. That means there's going to be missions, there's going to be bosses, and stuff like that. And then the MMO means that a lot of people are in the same server as you. It doesn't mean you have to play with them. It means that they're there if you need them. If you need a new item, you need some advice, whatever, they're right there. They're with you in game. But that is an MMORPG. The combination of the two at a base level needs to be an RPG, man.
Let's do that. Let's dive into this fascinating genre and really ask, what is it? From the acronym MMORPG itself to the games we know as MMORPGs to the games we describe as MMOs which aren't quite. What are we actually talking about? Quick note, this video is kindly sponsored by Guild Wars 2, which is definitely an MMORPG, unlike Guild Wars 1, which is an online RPG. What's the difference? Let's find out. As always, thank you to the supporters on Patreon who allow me to keep making
Damn, he
these
has
videos.
a lot of supporters.
Several YouTubers far smarter than me have already made excellent videos examining what an MMORPG even is, from breaking down the acronym to analysing games that we would commonly describe as MMORPGs.
You just said that.
I actually think that games like I feel like more and more games are going to have MMORPG features. I think the best two examples of that are actually the best example of that, or two examples, is Path of Exile and Diablo Immortal.
Yeah,
I think
that's a
both
good
of
example.
these games do a very good job at utilizing interactions between other players and their outside. Yeah, they're going to be like social hubs, like social interaction points, things like that.
Yeah, someone in the chat said Destiny 2. I kind of agree with that. Or something like, even battle royales, right? They're trending in that direction where it's like there's just a lot of people on a server. There might be PvE involved, something like Escape from Tarkov, where there's different types of, bosses, if you'll call them that, or whatever. They're trending in that direction. Even something like Borderlands, if they were to like get more people in on a server and make it like still party based, you know what I mean? Stuff like that.
Oh, just give me a second. Sorry.
Yeah, people just like the social aspect
and,
in
what's
any
this
game.
here?
Even like a game like Elder Scrolls or Fallout, like Fallout 76, right? Or you would like for them to at least be like party co-op, you know what I mean? Just getting closer and closer to what an MMO is.
Yeah, and I'm gonna see. I think we're gonna see more of that because people like being in a shared world, and I think a game that has a shared world is fundamentally an MMORPG. Like in most ways. It's getting a little bit chilly up in this bitch. I had the heater on, but the bitch broke. It broke like 3 years ago. Sometimes
3
it
years ago.
It turns on like once every 3 days. It's kind of annoying, but it is what it is.
I got an Amazon Basics.
Start a fire. Yeah.
While we've made some advancement into working out what the hell this genre even is, there's only two things we really, as a community, agree on.
Multiple
One,
players.
Steam doesn't know what an MMO is, because the MMO tagged games are always quite strange.
Yes.
And two, an MMO is a game in which there is a fishing minigame.
Right.
That's about as far as we've got.
It's got a
As
fish.
for why fishing specifically, Adam Millard has a brilliant video on why so many games turn to that exact thing. If you're interested in game design, go and give it a watch. I'll link it in the description.
I might watch
But
that.
beyond
That's good.
fishing, what is an MMORPG? Well, the acronym stands for Massively Multiplayer Online Role-Playing Game. So I
True.
wanted to break this down and examine each bit individually. How massive? Multiplayer in what context? Is it always online? And what level of
Yes.
freedom is given within the RPG aspect? Some
Right.
games we would know as MMORPGs aren't necessarily massive. Some of them don't even require multiplayer. Some of them aren't even always online. But while I was writing a brief outline of all the important points I wanted to cover in this rather long topic, I saw this tweet by Mrs. Sticks, retweeted by MMO Byte. The original tweet reads, "Why do we like MMOs so much if we keep playing it like a single player?" And
Again, it's because people like being in a shared world, so they feel
Yep.
less lonely spending fucking 8 hours a day on a video game.
True.
I think that's a big factor. People just like being in a shared world.
Yeah. I think another big factor is like it gives more value to the things you get. If you get like a rare item in a single player game, you know, it's cool. But if you get a rare item in a multiplayer game, or let's say you get two especially, then you can sell them. So like things have value to an essence, in an essence, and it's like yeah, it makes everything feel more meaningful. Even if you're gonna play them like single player, I mean that's part of the fun too. Is that like you can go to a boss. Well, in some of these games, you can go to a boss or a raid. Like RuneScape is a good example of a game where you have bosses where people never fight them alone because they're super hard. But there's that skill ceiling where if you do them sit by yourself, you know, you make more profit or they're more difficult or whatever. But yeah, like understanding having a value to like the economy, to the gold. You know, in every RPG, basically, like the gold or currency feels mostly useless. In an MMO, obviously, there's still value there. Things like that.
That's all it is.
MMO Byte replies, "It's such an unusual direction to take the genre, making it solo-friendly, less massively multiplayer. I think soon we're going to see MMORPGs simply become online role-playing games."
I disagree with that. I think that something that is massively multiplayer does not necessarily hinge on the fundamental that you have to interact with other players in order to accomplish tasks in the game.
I don't like when you have
Things
to.
can be multiplayer with people performing tasks simultaneously and not cooperatively.
Yeah.
It's like just, I don't think that's really true.
The interesting aspect of that reply is he left out the MM, massively multiplayer. So if encouraging solo play of a multiplayer game is enough to justify changing the acronym, then the multiplayer element must be a core design pillar of this genre.
It's
This
big.
seemed like a good place to start exploring. I'm not saying MMO Byte is right or wrong in his reply, it's just a solid starting
All right,
point.
let's
Because
go.
is it a different direction? Or has this aspect actually always been there? Before
Always, it's hard to say always. But it's like in every MMO, in every game, there's probably things that you can do without a group.
Yeah.
Like whether it's like farming some sort of resource or, you know, selling gear, buying gear. Like
Yeah,
there are always
quests.
going to be solo activities that exist in an MMO. It's just, I think the question is whether, like, how much of content should be gated from somebody who doesn't want to engage in the multiplayer aspect of the game.
I think
or
none.
cooperative.
None except like the very, very high level like boss and raids. High level boss and raids, I think it's cool. And I like, you know, RuneScape is just such a good example of everything you would want. Like having bosses that are most optimal with 3 people, but you can do it alone. Or there are raids where you need 2 people at least, or up to 4, maybe even more. I don't like games like I don't like how New World you need 4 people to enter a raid, or Final Fantasy I think does similar. I think a lot of MMOs do the same thing where you need a certain amount of people to do raids, and especially when that's part of the quest line, I don't like it, man. I think you should be able to play an MMO pretty much solo, apart from like your contribution to the economy and stuff like that. I mean, even RuneScape has Iron Man, where it's just you can't even trade with people, you can't share drops or anything like that. You know, different people want to play it different ways, and I think that's fine. It's cool. It's cool to have the flex and all that. And there's always going to be people who want to group up, because obviously there's always strength in numbers.
Player aspect of the game.
We look at whether older MMORPGs even allowed solo play, never mind encouraged it, we have to ask a simple question of why would someone want to play solo?
And keep in mind, World of Warcraft, one of its original selling points that was huge, that separated it from a lot of its competitors at the time, was the fact that you could play in level to 60 solo.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't have to rely on a bunch of other people to do stuff. And that's why it was so popular.
MMORPG, massively multiplayer, a genre which prides itself on giving you the ability to play with millions of other people, players from all around the globe. Why would anyone choose to take on a multiplayer adventure on their own? Well, the answer's pretty simple. It's because you want to.
Yeah.
The gameplay of an MMO is usually a fantastical adventure, broken down by slow, monotonous grinding between the exciting bits, leveling skills or killing the same enemy again and again. And while it can be nice to have company during these long stretches of repetition, it's not always wanted. People enjoy doing lots of things by themselves. I like real-time strategy games, but I also like playing against the computer. I like Unreal Tournament against bots. I like painting Warhammer by myself. All things which are considered boring and repetitive by some, and which could likely be improved by sharing the experience with someone else. But here's the thing. I do share those experiences with other people when I want to. If I want to play multiplayer games with other people, I will. Or if I want to paint models with other people, I will. The important thing is, I have the choice.
I think that's what it really is it's the choice. I have never seen a advantage or a good time created in a video game. I don't say never, but I feel like in 90% of circumstances, whenever you take a choice away from a player, this makes the experience for that player worse.
Yes.
Where they could decide whether they want to do this in a group or solo, or they have to do it this way or that way. Usually, whenever you take that choice away, the game is worse because of it.
Yeah. And this is why I also don't like class-based MMOs, where, like, you know, if you're going to kill a certain boss and you're only a mage and you can't just become a melee or something like that, you can't just switch or use all of them, you know. RuneScape, it's all dependent on the gear you're wearing, so you can just gear switch into something that gives you better benefits on a different combat style. And I don't like games that require healers, because, man, people don't want to be healers. It's true. Most people, there are people who do want to be healers, and they should be able to, but most people don't want to be healers. And that always causes a problem in how quickly you can find a group to do something. Makes it worse.
When someone says they enjoy playing MMO games solo, it doesn't necessarily mean they avoid all human contact at all costs. It usually means they prefer to enjoy the game either alone or with a closer, more specific group of friends.
Because and I have to say again, what goes to show how popular these things are, look at Sword Art Online. What is the main fucking thing with Kirito?
Oh, no.
He plays solo. And then we have the new anime coming out. Guess what it's called? Solo Leveling. And then Overlord is fundamentally built on the fact that he's playing solo. So every single popular rendition of an MMO that is compelling to an audience is all about playing the game solo. Isn't that interesting?
Those friends enjoy the game.
True, but then you have South Park, the episode Lover Warcraft or whatever it's called, where they play World of Warcraft. And one of the best parts was you had 4 people, I believe it was 4, who all worked together to defeat the crazy PvP motherfuckers. And that's cool too, and we like that, like strength in numbers.
In the same way they do,
if you
either
choose,
focusing on the lore, the mechanics, or min-maxing. It's important to not simply have a large player base for the sake of having a large player base if you don't actually interact with them. A fun play group who enhance the game for you is worth far more. Playing an MMO can often be a relaxing hobby, while constant interaction with people can be a draining hobby in both the real world and the virtual. Sometimes you just want to come home from a day surrounded by people and go and exist in a fantastical virtual world by yourself. Yes, there are other people also in this world, but that's actually a calming element of it, because you don't need to spend energy interacting with them, it's just nice to have them there. Other players are acting as free-thinking, feeling background characters, framing...
Yeah, see, everybody thought that I was some kind of a fucking psycho whenever I say I treat the other players like they're NPCs, but now whenever Josh says it, oh, now everybody agrees. Uh-huh, yeah, sure. Okay, guys, yeah, I see how it is.
Your own adventure, lending the world weight and reality. Knowing that your actions affect a living world without the emotional effort of constantly needing to be social in that world is enjoyable. Playing an MMO with a group means you will have certain expectations, requirements of you.
That's right.
You'll have to keep up with any chat that's going on or play your class. You have a role to fulfill and you can't let your team down. And that's pressure.
You can.
Sometimes you want to experience the gameplay of an MMORPG, the world, the music, the characters, the lore, the story, or the mechanics, without that pressure of feeling like you need to fulfill a role in a team. You can have the game on in the background while you watch a film, watch Netflix, read a book, or even do some work.
Well, to be fair, a lot of the people that I raid with did that during Mythic. So, yeah, this is not necessarily exclusive to playing casually. There's a lot of people that I knew that did this. Oh, God.
Likely what you're doing right now, which is watching some YouTube videos. It can be nice to experience the MMORPG without the pressure that being in a team puts on you.
Yeah.
Whatever your favorite MMO is, it can always be played in the background. And if you aren't playing an MMO right now, consider downloading this video's sponsor, Guild Wars 2. This is the second video of mine that Guild Wars 2 have sponsored quite recently, which makes me think the management team have finally found the marketing team hiding in a long-forgotten office somewhere or just playing jumping puzzles all day and are demanding they actually start doing their job and sponsoring some YouTubers or something. I've played Guild Wars 2 since it launched all the way back in 2012, and it's been one of the few MMOs I've installed on every...
But yeah, I mean, it's one of the things I like too, is like just being able to watch a YouTube video. That's like part of my problem right now with like super competitive games. Is every time I play them, I need to have, you know, maybe light music, but no podcasts, no YouTube videos, because I'm expected to like communicate and like try super hard. And man, a lot of the times when I'm gaming, I just want to listen to something that's interesting at the same time to kind of keep my ADHD at bay. You know what I mean?
Hours I've got out of this game, Guild Wars 2 is probably the best value money I've ever spent on a video game. To celebrate the Steam launch, there's a link in the description. You can sign up, get a code, and grab the game on Steam, and then if you want, you can redeem the code for an experience boost pack, some karma boosting, and a 10-slot bag with a mini pet. This all saves you about $10, and it's free, so there's no reason not to. There's a new player guide on the website, although the in-game tutorial is actually really good. There's great build variety in the classes, and the mount system is so good it is now the standard by which other games are to be judged. Now, regular viewers will know that I don't accept sponsorships unless I can personally vouch for the product, and honestly, Guild Wars 2 is just a really good MMORPG game with a great deal of content that every player should at least try. Right, back to talking about solo MMO gameplay.
A lot of people have been trying to get me to play that game. There's been a lot, man.
Play MMORPGs on stream, I often have people following me around, but I would still consider myself a mostly solo player, despite the fact I enjoy dungeons and team-based events. So how does that work? Well, the simple fact that I'm playing with...
Ascalon, that was the name of fucking Thordan's sword. I wonder what that actually means. It's probably something that has to do with lion, right?
I gotta take vitamins, guys. You gotta take vitamins.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. Look it up. Brother of Gargoyle? Shut up.
People doesn't mean that I'm interacting with them or connecting to them in any meaningful way. And I think it's this lack of meaningful connection to other people that people often confuse with the lack of multiplayer elements.
Yeah.
There is a long-held belief that newer MMORPGs are pushing people more towards solo-focused play. You exist in a world with other people, but you don't necessarily interact with them. I've even made a video called Social to Solo, where I look at how the design philosophy has changed over the years, allowing people to experience the games solo. But were older games actually more cooperative? Did they demand more teamwork, or do people simply remember them as more cooperative because hanging out with people online was novel for the time, so people did that aspect more?
I think it's probably a bit of both. If I had to
both.
think about it, like with classic WoW, probably a bit of both, and with other games about the same.
Not so much
Massively
RuneScape.
multiplayer part is a major point of contention within the MMORPG community.
Yeah.
What is massive? It's not quantified,
penis.
it's far too vague. From games designers to players, we don't know what you want massive to count as. 1,000 players? 10,000? 100,000? A million? Or
billion.
10 million? If you count 1 million players as massive, can I have 1 million people on my friends list? Could I have an ignore list 1 million players long? Will there
You know, it's a good question. I think there should be 1 to 2K per server. I think you should be able to switch servers at will, kind of like RuneScape. I think anything less than like 2,000, like you can feel it. You can feel that it's not massive. And then when you lock people to a server and your server starts to die down, and then that ruins your entire experience, I mean, it just feels bad.
ever be a
Fortunately
zone
not.
where you could actually have 1 million players all at one time? Could you even interact with 1 million if you wanted to? If you have a number higher than the amount of players a single player could realistically be expected to engage with at any one time, is that enhancing your player base, or is that simply padding it out?
Yeah, I think it is enhancing the player base because it feels like it's a shared event that other people do. It's why people like going to large events in real life. They like the feeling of I was there, Pog. Like that's what they do in Twitch chat whenever something crazy happens.
Yeah,
I feel like that's what a lot of these things are. Is that people like being part of a shared space and having a shared experience. And also I think there's the element of if a game doesn't have a lot of players, it probably isn't going to have a lot of content, or at least not for very long it's not. So that's the other reason why people are very sensitive about player count numbers, is that they can also indicate a downturn in the game or a different direction in how the game's going to be developed.
Yeah.
How big is massive, and how big does massive need to be for the players to actually notice? Old school RuneScape has hundreds of thousands of active players, so it could rightfully be called a massively successful game, and it's definitely multiplayer, but each individual world holds up to 2,000 people, meaning even if you had every single player on a given world in the same space, you'd only be interacting with a tiny fraction of the total player base at any one time, and you wouldn't likely be able to form any meaningful connection with any one of them in the mass of players. The Elder Scrolls Online has its mega servers, shards, all existing simultaneously, but instead of showing you every player around you, it has phasing, where you'll always see enough players for the world to feel full, but never so many you feel overwhelmed, which makes it easier to form connections. But is this still massive if you're experiencing a curated version of the player base? Is the word massive more about the reality of who you interact with in the game, or the greater community around the game?
I think it's like the, I would say, and especially whenever you're going out in the world, I think it's the potential for spontaneous interactions. So like whenever you're out like exploring in the game, like what is the chances that you're going to run into another player? What are the chances that you're going to see 2 or 3 other people playing a game? I think that's what it is that people want to feel like they're part of a shared world doing something that's bigger than themselves. They're part of something that's bigger than themselves. I think this is a core human desire more than just being a core video game desire too.
Majority of your game is dungeons and raids with say 5, 10 or 25 people in a raid. Are you actually interacting with 25 people? Or are you interacting with thousands of people in groups of 25 at a time? Or are you interacting at all? Does a dungeon run with no connection to another player even count as interaction?
That's kind of the argument against LFR in some cases. I think it's true, is that like what's really the difference between having NPCs in your group and players in your group in LFR? Well, it's simple. The NPCs would do better.
Close to a random player in a random group as you are to a stranger you walk alongside while walking through town, or someone sat 2 seats behind you on a roller coaster. Just because you're going on the same journey doesn't mean you're taking the journey together. MMOs are often broken down into the styles of theme park versus sandbox.
Yeah.
Would going to a theme park alone count as interacting with everyone at the park?
Yes.
Could you say you've had a multiplayer experience?
Yes.
And should anyone be stopped having that experience if they are alone? Most often it's less about the potential of who you could interact with and more about who you actually do interact with. A small group of 5 to 10 friends talking and adventuring together will feel a lot more social and connected than 500 players silently running the same dungeon again and again. Quality really does beat quantity when it comes to meaningful human interactions.
And sometimes like having a lot of people in a zone is really cool, even if you're not directly interacting with them.
Yeah.
So like a good example of this is, you guys remember the Legion pre-expansion event where like everybody was in like Westfall or Ashara, I think that was another one of them, and like they were going around defeating the crossroads, and like everybody was flying on their mounts from like different places. That was so cool, man.
Yeah.
And it's like I wasn't directly interacting with them, but it felt really cool to be part of the wave.
Yeah,
You
or
know,
like
you're-
holiday
you're-
events.
You're one
for
small
MMOs.
cog in the machine, and sometimes that feels cool.
Psychologists have even
Yeah,
studied
when you have holiday events and it's like Christmas or Halloween and everybody's in the same area doing the little holiday event, that's awesome, I think, even if you're not doing it with anybody. But what's one thing you can do is if you're having trouble, you can ask people around you, and that's also like, you know what I mean? You're not interacting with everybody, but you interact at will.
how many people we can actually feel connected to. It's known as Dunbar's
200,
number,
right?
and it's around
Yeah.
150 people. Any more and you simply cannot connect to them on an individual personal level, meaning even if your game does have 1 billion players, only 150 of them may be close enough to you to be meaningful to play with. The massively part of the acronym can
But like that doesn't mean that you should have like a 200-person server, because you're not going to like every person, right?
sometimes be a bit of a false selling point. Having 1 million players means nothing unless you're required to interact with all 1 million, and if you are, that's overwhelming. Having enough players
I
to
don't
make your
agree with
game
that.
feel fleshed out and full, but not too many to overwhelm, while still maintaining those personal relationships, is a good amount to aim for. The potential for connections is massive, but until the player chooses to realize those potentials and actually interact with and connect to people, it remains potential, not realized. Many modern MMO games are designed so you don't need to interact with people, but you can if you choose to. The potential is there, but it's not required. It's this change in design, this facilitation of solo play in a genre which prides itself on multiplayer aspects that many people point to as the downfall of the genre.
I don't think it's a change, because it's always been MMORPG, and the whole RPG portion of gaming has been the ability or you know, just a solo experience. So I don't think it's changed. Well, you know, maybe a lot of games are trending in that direction, but I think that's how it started. So I think it kind of came away from that because everyone was so fascinated with the ability that you can interact with people online. It was a novel thing, so they pushed that because people loved that. But, you know, you kind of realize that it's like, if you can only play a game in a group, then you can't play if you don't have a group. You know what I mean? The RPG portion of it means that, or kind of pushes towards something that you can do solo. And the MMO is just what makes it better and feel more meaningful because there's other people there with you.
They say MMORPGs used to be games which needed player interaction and so forced those connections between players, resulting in long-term friendships, guilds, or clans. And now taking...
I do think that like it was good, and there are points in games where I think Classic WoW actually does the MMORPG balance really well. Where like whenever you get up to the Hogger quest, you don't really have to do it. But if you do it, you're going to get a lot of experience, and it's going to give you a good reward. It's going to give you, I think, a blue at that point. And like blues or no, not blues. It's going to give you a green. And like greens at that point are a big deal. So like you are heavily incentivized to group up with other people.
Yeah.
And because like classes were designed in a way that like most classes couldn't solo Hogger at like level 11 or 12. Like it just probably wasn't going to happen unless maybe you were a warlock or something.
Problem.
You had to find somebody else to play with you and do that. So you didn't have to group up with other people, but there are advantages for doing so, and there are certain things that, you know, are convenient if you do that. I think that was a really, really good decision by Blizzard, and I think the way that Classic WoW incentivized interaction but didn't force it until like you get really to the late game, into like raids, I think that was a really good decision.
That away, the genre is weaker for it. And this is of course subjective, but I decided maybe I should go back and play an older MMORPG and see how that handles the facilitation of solo play to gather some information on this strange phenomenon. Now, I've played a lot of MMORPGs, some for thousands of hours, some for only a few, but most of them have allowed me to have a pretty decent solo experience, teaming up with people when I wanted to, playing alone when I wanted to, and I value this. MMORPGs often advertise themselves by saying you can have your own adventure, especially the sandbox games. Live your own way, forge your own path, and if I want that path to be alone, who occasionally teams up, that should be something I can choose to do. If you look at many of the modern MMO offerings, you'll see solo play is not only viable, but often encouraged. Old school RuneScape and RuneScape 3 both have their Iron Man mode, literally cutting off a layer of interaction with other players by removing trading, forcing you to survive this harsh world on your own. And most of the endgame bosses can be soloed. Indeed, when I spoke to Mod Kieran and Elena about the latest raid coming out, I asked specifically if they designed this to be solo possible, and they had. The Elder Scrolls Online has a solo-focused story with fully voice-acted cutscenes and lots of solo instances as you travel to save Tamriel, and the world bosses are possible solo but incredibly tough. Guild Wars 2 is the same, a deep involving story with a vast majority of the game being solo-friendly. And when the grouping does happen, if it happens impromptu, it gets organised behind the scenes, so just by being near someone, you're automatically working toward the same goal as them, meaning you can...
And they have this with WoW too. It's like whenever you tag a quest mob or something, you're working with somebody else.
Now work together alone. Star Wars The Old Republic is one of the better single-player Star Wars games and Star Wars stories, which just happens to be online. It takes place in an online world with other players. Even the Flashpoints, team-based dungeons, will supply you with AI-controlled NPCs to complete them if you don't have a team. Now, I'm not saying these games don't have multiplayer content.
Old School
RuneScape has Barbarian Assault, a minigame which needs a team. The Elder Scrolls Online has its dungeons. Guild Wars 2 has the PvP Battlegrounds and the Fractals. These games all have content which cannot be completed solo, but this isn't usually early game or story focused. These multiplayer experiences are usually extra, in addition
to... I think usually the expectation is that, like, this is what I would expect from an MMO nowadays, is that you can level up, there are probably group opportunities while leveling up, but for the most part, leveling up is a solo experience, and the real MMO aspect of it is going to happen at endgame.
To the main game. Indeed, Star Wars, supplying AI NPCs to accompany solo players through dungeons by fleshing out the team, is a mechanic I've been a big fan of for a long time. Allowing solo players to experience what your game has poured endless hours of design into is a good idea. It's the same reason I really like the henchman system in Guild Wars 1 a lot, but we'll get onto this later. So we can see that modern MMOs are mostly accessible to solo players, with the choice to connect to others if you want to. But let's go back and see how older MMOs handle this. I decided to go back and try and play EverQuest 1 on Steam, the live version, not the Project 99 original. I even streamed the whole thing on YouTube. The VOD is available to go back and watch if you want to. And I'll likely stream more because I actually really enjoyed EverQuest 1. It's janky in places and it's far too convoluted in others. It relies a lot on keyboard shortcuts and typing your interactions, and target enemy is bound to F8 and not tab, and it's hard to click through things, which threw me a little, but all in all, it's a very well-made game. Now, EverQuest released back in 1999, and it's not only still going, but it's still being actively updated. It's had 28 expansions, with the 29th planned for release in 2023. That is an insanely successful lifespan for an MMORPG. It is testament to the quality of the game that it still has an active player base.
I wonder how many people actually play that game. Yeah, like what really are the numbers?
Even as an example of an old-school, hardcore MMORPG. It's harsh, it's unforgiving. You need to rely on your team to survive, and that is indeed true. EverQuest is a hard game, both in gameplay and in the meta elements of the gameplay. Understanding the UI and navigating all the keyboard shortcuts will take you some time to learn.
Yeah, sure.
The thing with EverQuest is there's a lot of downtime between the gameplay moments. As a mage, you need to sit down to recover your mana, and this means as a fighter, you'll be waiting for the mage. There's a lot of moments where nothing is happening, and so you will talk to the players in your group. When EverQuest was big in 1999 and 2000, you didn't have Netflix. You didn't have a second monitor to watch YouTube on. You would focus entirely on the game, and therefore you would find the fun within the game, which, for the majority of the game, was talking to other people.
Yeah.
So when I played EverQuest...
And like back then, like you couldn't even really tab out and watch porn at the same time.
True.
That's another big factor that Josh isn't talking about, is like
The porn
back in the
aspect.
day, like computers weren't really good enough to like have the browser open and like have a video or something like that, or like look at something at the same time that you're playing the game. So you actually had to be like focused in on the game itself. Now, this got fixed in like late Burning Crusade, Wrath of the Lich King for a lot of people, but in the early days, yeah, you actually had to play the game.
Decided to read all the classes, and what really stood out to me was the description of the Necromancer class. In character creation, the class is described as: Necromancers are a very self-sufficient class and often choose to adventure alone, though they can provide great value to a group as well. The Necromancer is an excellent choice for the independent player who enjoys a wide variety of abilities. On the EverQuest wiki, the class is described as one of the best soloing classes throughout the game. Now,
what a
EverQuest has seen
surprise.
many changes throughout the years. I assumed maybe this was a modern update, but there's a version of the game known as Project 99 which emulates the original experience without any of the quality of life upgrades. And the Project 99 wiki entry for the Necromancer describes it as such, the Necromancer is very independent. Few support classes are able to offer anything that the Necromancer does not already have, and items and gear do not carry the same importance as they do for other classes. The Wiki Class Highlights section even says, Necromancers are one of the most independent of all classes, being designed with a number of self-only spells that certain other casters can cast on others. Example, self-only invisibility and self-only evacuation, making it a prime choice for those that plan to solo the majority of their careers.
There it is.
However, because of the wide variety of abilities, many not gained until higher levels, a Necromancer must constantly learn new ways to play their class. So even back in 1999, before the popular argument that MMORPGs were becoming too solo-friendly, in the game that many consider one of the grandfathers of the genre, there was a class specifically designed to allow people to adventure alone. When I played...
Who could have possibly guessed that actually this was the same as it always was, and people are just being unreasonable? Who could have possibly guessed such a amazing development? That people's nostalgia was wrong. Meridian 59 was the first ever MMORPG.
Was it?
Meridian 59, considered the first 3D MMORPG, the opening crypt tutorial section has a door which requires two people to open. You must pull two levers at the same time. And while it is...
And just like that, you kill your game, because as soon as there aren't other people who are progressing, who are at the same level of progression, the same mission as you, you can't continue the game. That's stupid.
Possible to do solo with almost frame-perfect inputs, it's not a required room. It simply leads to an optional boss and some low-level loot. In fact, nothing about Meridian 59 demands you team up to play. How about Guild Wars 1, considered by many to not be an MMORPG, but instead, including by themselves, an online role-playing game? How does this differ? Well, in Guild Wars 1, the world is broken down into maps, both safe or dangerous, and the only times you will see other players in Guild Wars 1 is when you're all in a hub city or a safe outpost. When you travel outside of the city, you'll only ever see yourself or any other players you specifically teamed up with while you were in that safe area.
It's PoE.
So if you leave town without talking to another player, is the game going to force you to adventure solo? Well, no. There's an NPC henchman system. By the exits of any safe map, you'll find a row of henchmen you can invite to your team, and they'll fight by your side throughout the map, acting as regular players. In fact, once you're a higher level, you can actually turn your own characters into mercenaries, meaning they will now be available as NPC supports when you play on other characters. So you're
That's really cool.
That's cool.
Like that's actually fucking badass. Wow. Yeah, I like that a lot.
supported by your own old characters. And it's this lack of open world player interaction which leads people to describe Guild Wars 1 as an online RPG, not necessarily a massively multiplayer online RPG. Even Final Fantasy XIV is considered an RPG first with an MMO second, meaning it's focused more on the personal journey of the player through its story with multiplayer elements added on, such as the dungeons and the raids, and then the daily roulette allowing you to find a team quickly to receive your reward for playing. But just look at the memes. People say the end game of almost any MMO, including Final Fantasy XIV and Guild Wars 2, is fashion. Just chatting in Limsa Lominsa, or trying to turn yourself into a light bulb. Extremely social things to do. Socializing is alive and well in many MMOs because the choice is there. While it's also not being forced.
Well, it's because people can socialize in those games, and socialization and player expression is much wider. This is a problem that I think New World and Tower of Fantasy have, is that player expression is very limited.
Yeah.
It's also 100%. A problem that Lost Ark has, and that problem is compounded by the fact that it's an isometric game. So you have much more limited player expression. How many things can the players do? The truth is that in New World, Tower of Fantasy, and Lost Ark, it's way less than in WoW, and WoW is way less than in Final Fantasy XIV. You can do way more shit in Final Fantasy XIV in terms of making your character look a certain way, wearing certain types of clothes, looking a certain type of way, having hairstyles, like all this kind of stuff, like interacting, like emotes, like having your own house. It just goes on and on and on. Yep. And because of that, you see more social interaction in those games.
Dude, on RuneScape, MMO, I mean, I spent most of my RuneScape career like doing as much as I could solo, but I also spent hundreds of hours just standing at the Grand Exchange, the trading center, and just like talking to people and just like hanging out and having a good time, like just hanging out. The fact that you can be social, but we weren't really required to.
Solo connection player if they don't want
versus
to.
No booba.
This means the MM part of the acronym, massively multiplayer, seems to relate to both the player base size and the potential to interact with them in the game world at random, not the social need or demand to party up to experience the majority of the game. Yes, you can form connections with people in online games. You've always been able to.
Yep.
That aspect hasn't gone anywhere.
Oh, I made probably more friends in Halo than I made in vanilla WoW.
Wow.
Like, when I really think about it, I had like a half a dozen people that I was friends with in vanilla WoW, but like in Halo 2, bro, we were popping the fuck off. Like, I had a full friends list.
You can still do that, you just don't need to do it as frequently. People often say to me, yes, I know you can still do that, but older games encouraged it, so people did it more. And that might be true, but if people are doing something because they're pushed to do it without a choice, that doesn't necessarily mean they would do it if given the choice.
Right.
In modern-day MMOs, we see that choice exist more, and more players are choosing to play with smaller, closer-knit groups of friends, or refer to themselves as solo players.
I think that it's good to give people advantages for playing in groups.
Yeah.
In general, playing something at a high level should be rewarded if you're playing with a group, minus like solo accomplishments like Mage Tower, Necromancer, Lone Hero, etc. But besides that, I think that, you should want to play in a group. But it should not be mandatory. It should not be something you have to do. In all circumstances. I do think that, for big raids against a big dragon, of course you need a lot of people for that, sure. But in everything else, I'm fine with it.
Playstyle which has always been on some level supported, but is now much, much more popular. So have MMORPGs become less social? Not really. All of the elements to be social are still there, there's just other stuff to do as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost more social with, every game pretty much has an in-game like guild system or clan system, gang system, whatever you want to call it. And, a lot of these people are going to almost require you to join a Discord, and, there'll be a voice chat there and stuff like that. So, I think the multiplayer aspect of it is even more so than before. I mean, also including, if you were to include like YouTube and live streaming, and it's like you have all these people who are viewing a video or a live stream, and they're in the comments or the chat, and they're all talking together. You know, even if you're not fully in the game, you are being social, and it is adding to your own gameplay.
Unlike the downtime in EverQuest when you would sit down to restore your mana and therefore you had nothing else to do but talk to someone, you now have hundreds of other things to do,
Yeah, you go on
both
Twitter.
in and out of the game.
Go on YouTube.
Why play an MMORPG solo? Because you want to. At that exact moment, you maybe don't want to interact with people. You maybe don't want to be relied upon to play your role within a team. It doesn't mean that you won't interact with people in the future, or wait till your mates log on and join up with them. It doesn't mean that you won't talk to someone as they cut a tree down or mine a rock next to you. It just means that you have lots of other choices other than being social to distract you.
I just feel like whenever you think of almost any sort of like fantasy game, like I used the example of like Overlord, Sword Art Online, you know, that kind of stuff. But like with a lot of stuff, in Lord of the Rings, you know, they're not always in a full party. I mean, Gandalf's soloing shit on his own all the time. Like, fucking Aragorn just got done soloing something whenever you hear about him in the story. It's like in like the fundamentals of these RPG stories, it's usually about the solo player who comes together with a group to accomplish something that's larger than themselves. And I think that in order for that to happen, you have to have the solo experience for people to diverge from it. Because if you never have the divergence, then it doesn't feel the same way.
It just means you want to exist within this multiplayer world as a single player for a short time. And there's nothing to stop you from doing that.
I mean, how many people in real life are in this massive multiplayer online, massive multiplayer offline Earth who are living their life mostly solo with maybe a handful of people who they interact with sometimes, you know what I mean? Like even in real life, people are doing the same thing because, yeah, if you join a team, you can be part of the biggest conglomerate in the world. You can be part of Amazon in a team, or you can be solo and you can make your own shipping company and you can make your own online marketplace, and it's more rewarding and it's a bigger flex. You know what I mean? So even in real life, we're doing the same thing, man. We have the opportunity to be MMO, but you know, sometimes we just want to chill on our own, do our own thing.
And if you play an MMO...
Yeah, Guts. Yeah, there you go. Like, yeah, Guts. You know, he was in a party for a while, and then he left the party. He's like, this is the band. You know, he's like, I'm fucking done with this. Like, I'm going to go and do my own thing.
Solo, you're not playing it wrong. You're just enjoying your adventure your way. As for that tweet, I think MMORPGs have always, to some players, been solo-focused online role-playing games that exist within a living world.
Exactly, yeah. They do not have to require constantly. Tanjiro solos a lot of time, too. Well, Tanjiro follows probably one of the most common MMO tropes, which is a higher-level male character literally carrying a female lower-level character through different events. So, yeah, I think that's about right.
The multiplayer bit was, to several players, more of the potential for social connection and not a demand to do so.
Yeah.
And just like the potential was years ago, it's still there, it's just not as novel as it used to be. So people aren't specifically selling the games on the fact you can do that. The social players exist within guilds and clans, discords and forums. Still connected, just not chatty within the game itself.
Yeah.
Modern MMOs do indeed have more systems that facilitate easier solo play than ever before. But this isn't driving the games to become solo only. It's simply increasing the amount of choice in...
I need to put that in WoW. Hopefully, yeah, Wizard needs to take that one too. That's cool how he can jump up like that.
How you play. There's nothing stopping you teaming up, just like the old days, with a huge group of players and adventuring around together. But
Yeah.
unlike the old days, there's now much more choice to not do that,
expansion.
and people are choosing that much more frequently. But how
I
do
think
you...
also people are going to choose the path of least resistance. Like if something is going to take 5 minutes extra, people don't want to do that. They want to do it right now. So it's like,
Yeah.
if you make playing in a group inconvenient or non-seamless, people aren't going to want to do it because it's going to take more time. It's that simple.
play? Are you a solo-only player? Are you social with everyone? Or do you prefer mostly solo play until your mates log on, where you'll team up with them? Let me know in the comments below. Another massive thank you to Guild Wars 2 for sponsoring this video. Use the link in the description to get the game and some cool free stuff. And as always, have a great day.
Oh, look at that. What a nice guy. Yeah, I feel like I feel like this is generally true. I mean, like, obviously with a lot of these types of games, there are always the options to play solo. There's always the option to go out and do your own thing and be your own person, etc. I don't think that's a bad thing. And I think that, you know, as Josh showed in this video, I think that many of these MMOs have a lot of options to play solo. They've always had this. This has always been a popular theme in fantasy, and also a popular theme in like anime and shit like that, and media about it too. And I think to water that down and say, oh, well, you know, you have to play with other people all the time or it's not an MMORPG, or you have to do X or Y or it's not an MMORPG. This is so silly. It's just so silly. And I think it's people that are just trying to... You remember whenever Blizzard did this in Shadowlands? They're like, is it really an RPG anymore if we don't have conduit energy? It just sounded so stupid, didn't it? Yeah, well, think about how the people that are saying the stuff about MMORPGs sound. I think they sound just about as stupid as Blizzard did with that stuff. Yeah, meaningful choice. Yeah, silly goose shit. Introverted people are not...
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good video. I think it's good for especially developers to, you know, just make sure they're going the right way. But I think the big problem that you got to bring up next is class-based MMOs. Class-based. You know, I played New World, and you can respec in New World, but for me to juggle 100 different, or let's just, you know, a dozen different combat styles, a dozen different weapons, and to keep them all, like, you know, in stashes in certain places and stuff like that, it's kind of a hassle. Like, I'm max level in New World as a mage, and I'm honestly kind of bored of being a mage. And then you also have to worry about balancing if you pick a class that isn't that good at certain things. And it's like, you know, part of the reason why I'm having trouble getting back in a New World is because I just don't want to play a mage anymore. And I also don't want to respec, go into a different build, and then need to get new gear and need to like build up my gear level to be able to get gear where I'm relevant in those different combat styles. And it's just such a hassle. I think class-based games like this are just not very good, and they limit you more than they help you. Everything should be available to everyone. RuneScape is just a great example of a game that I think did a lot of things correct in the MMO genre, and it sucks that it gets overlooked so much when people look at like making a new MMO. They look at, you know, games like World of Warcraft and Guild Wars and EverQuest and Final Fantasy, and it's like no one's looking at RuneScape, and I think it's bringing us further from what's really good, man. RuneScape did a lot of things right. You were able to play solo, but you were incentivized to play as a group at the same time. The only thing RuneScape really missed out on is I wish some of the quests were co-opable. So don't require us to do co-op. Like there's a few required co-op missions in RuneScape, and that make it kind of worse. But I wish that I could play with a friend and do a lot of the quests co-op. Yeah. So we're straying further from the truth if we keep looking at the same games. I hope you enjoyed. Have a good day.
Not necessarily...
Oh.